Sir, you need to leave this parking lot immediately.
I work here. I'm a doctor. This is a staff parking area.
I don't care what you claim. You're loitering.
Loitering? I'm walking to my shift. I have my badge right here.
You think I'm gonna fall for a Halloween costume and a cheap badge? Is this a joke?
It was 6:47 on a Tuesday morning in suburban Atlanta, Georgia, when Officer Brian Collins made a decision that would cost him his career, cost the city over $500,000, and spark a nationwide conversation about racial profiling in healthcare settings. The man walking through the hospital employee parking lot wasn't trespassing. He was Dr. Eric Johnson, a 42-year-old Black American cardiothoracic surgeon at Northside Hospital, arriving for his 7 a.m. shift. What had happened in the next 14 minutes would be captured on body camera, parking lot surveillance, and would become one of the most shared police misconduct videos of the year. Because what Officer Brian Collins couldn't imagine was that a person who looked like Dr. Johnson could be one of the most respected surgeons in the Southeast. Before we get into this wild story, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. And smash that subscribe button because this one is absolutely crazy. You won't believe what happens. Dr. Eric Johnson had been a cardiothoracic surgeon for 12 years. He'd completed his residency at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, one of the most prestigious programs in the country. 5 years of general surgery residency, 3 years of cardiothoracic surgery fellowship. He trained under some of the best surgeons in the world. After fellowship, he did additional specialized training at Cleveland Clinic, learning minimally invasive cardiac techniques. Then, he joined Northside Hospital in Atlanta 6 years ago. He performed open heart surgeries, valve replacements, coronary bypasses, aortic repairs, complex procedures that required steady hands, deep knowledge, and absolute focus. He'd done over 800 major cardiac procedures in his career. His patient survival rate was 97.4%, well above the national average of 94.2%. That 3.2% difference represented dozens of lives saved, dozens of people who went home to their families when statistics said they shouldn't have. He'd been named one of Atlanta's top doctors by Atlanta Magazine 3 years running. His colleagues respected him. His residents loved learning from him. His patients trusted him with their lives. Literally. That Tuesday morning, he was scheduled to perform a triple bypass on a 68-year-old man named Richard Coleman. Richard had suffered a heart attack 6 weeks earlier. 3 of his coronary arteries were severely blocked. Without surgery, he had maybe 6 months to live. With surgery, he could have 10 or 15 more years with his wife of 43 years, his 4 children, and his 9 grandchildren. Eric had met with Richard and his family the previous Friday. He'd explained the procedure in detail. He'd answered every question. He'd looked Richard in the eye and said, "I'll take care of you." And he meant it. Every patient was someone's father, someone's husband, someone's entire world. The surgery was scheduled for 8 a.m. Eric always arrived an hour early to review the patient's chart one final time, check that the surgical suite was properly prepped, and mentally walk through the procedure step by step. Visualization was important. He learned that in residency. See the surgery in your mind before you make the first incision. He pulled into the hospital employee parking lot at 6:45 a.m. in his 10-year-old Honda Accord. He parked in his assigned spot, number 273. He grabbed his surgical bag from the passenger seat, a black backpack containing his stethoscope, his tablet with patient files, and a protein bar he probably wouldn't have time to eat. He was already wearing his navy blue surgical scrubs under a light gray jacket against the morning chill. March in Atlanta was unpredictable. Could be 50 degrees or 70 degrees. This morning it was about 55. His hospital ID badge was clearly visible, clipped to the front of his scrub top, hanging on a blue lanyard around his neck. The badge showed his photo, his name, his department, cardiothoracic surgery, and his role, attending surgeon. Anyone looking at him would immediately see he was hospital staff. He had his phone in his hand, checking a text from his wife about picking up their daughter from soccer practice that evening. He was 50 feet from the employee entrance when a police car pulled up beside him. Officer Brian Collins was 32 years old with 6 years on the Atlanta Police Department. He'd grown up in rural Georgia, joined the Marines right after high school, served 4 years, and then joined APD when he got out. He'd been assigned to patrol the hospital district for the past 8 months after spending 5 years in other parts of the city. Hospital security had complained about car break-ins in the employee parking lot. 3 incidents in the past 6 weeks. Someone had been checking car doors, looking for unlocked vehicles, stealing whatever was inside, phones, laptops, wallets, small stuff that could be grabbed quickly. Brian had been tasked with increasing patrols during shift changes, morning and evening, 6 to 8 a.m. and 6 to 8 p.m. Those were the high traffic times. That's when someone could blend in, look like they belonged, and hit multiple cars before anyone noticed. When he saw Eric walking through the parking lot that Tuesday morning, something triggered his suspicion. A black man, walking alone through the lot at dawn, looking at his phone, carrying a backpack. Even though Eric was wearing scrubs with a visible hospital badge hanging from his neck, Brian's mind immediately categorized him as suspicious. In Brian's mind, this still fits some profile of someone who didn't belong, someone checking car door handles, looking for unlocked vehicles. He'd been trained to look for suspicious behavior. The training was vague, subjective. It basically meant anything that seems off to you. And to Brian, a black man in the parking lot at dawn seemed off, regardless of what he was wearing. He pulled up beside Eric and rolled down his window. His body camera was recording. The timestamp would later show 6:47 and 32 seconds a.m. "Sir, you need to leave this parking lot immediately." Eric looked up from his phone, surprised. He'd been walking this same route every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday for 6 years. Same parking spot, same path to the employee entrance, same routine. He recognized Brian vaguely from seeing him patrol the hospital grounds over the past few months. They'd never spoken, but Eric had seen him in the cafeteria a few times. "I work here. I'm a doctor. This is the staff parking area." Brian had heard 100 variations of "I work here" from people who absolutely did not work there. In his experience, actual employees didn't get defensive. They showed their badges immediately. The fact that this guy was arguing, making excuses, meant he was probably lying. Plus, Brian had been specifically told to watch for suspicious individuals. Car break-ins were a problem. He was being vigilant. He was doing his job. "I don't care what you claim. You're loitering and..." Eric's confusion turned to irritation. "Loitering? I'm walking to my shift. I have my badge right here." He gestured to the hospital ID badge hanging visibly on his chest, right there, in plain view. Brian's assumption had already calcified into certainty. A black man claiming to be a doctor in this neighborhood. At dawn, the badge was probably fake. He'd heard every excuse. "You think I'm gonna fall for a Halloween costume and cheap badge?" The words hung in the air for a moment. Eric stopped moving entirely. He stared at Brian, trying to process what he'd just heard. "Is this a joke? No, this can't be for real." Brian got out of his patrol car. 6'2", 220 pounds of authority and control. His hand moved to his service weapon, not drawing it, just resting there, a posture of threat. Turn around, hands on the car. Now, quick question. If you were Dr. Johnson in this situation, what would you do? Comment below. Eric stared at Brian in disbelief. This was happening, actually happening. He was being detained in his workplace parking lot because an officer thought his medical credentials were a Halloween costume. "Officer, I'm a surgeon. I have a patient in pre-op right now waiting for surgery. I need to get inside. You have 3 seconds to comply or you're going to be arrested for obstruction." Obstruction? I'm trying to go to work. 1. This is absurd. 2. Eric knew he had no good options. If he walked away, Brian would tackle him. If he resisted, Brian would claim he was combative and use that to justify force. If he reached for his badge again, Brian had already made it clear he'd interpret that as a threat, maybe even reaching for a weapon. He was trapped. Trapped by assumptions. Trapped by bias. Trapped by the color of his skin and the shape of his eyes and whatever prejudices were running through Brian's mind. He turned around and placed his hands on Brian's patrol car. The hood was still warm from the engine. 3. Brian grabbed Eric's wrist and twisted his arm behind his back. The movement was sudden and forceful. Eric winced but didn't resist. He'd learned a long time ago that fighting back against police, even when you were 100% in the right, was a good way to get hurt or worse. Brian pulled out his handcuffs. The metal was cold against Eric's skin. "You're under arrest for trespassing and obstruction." The absurdity of the statement almost made Eric laugh. Trespassing in his own workplace, in the parking lot where he'd parked 5 days a week for 6 years. A woman's voice called out from across the parking lot. "Officer, what are you doing? That's Dr. Johnson." Brian looked up. A nurse in scrubs was running toward them, her badge swinging on a lanyard around her neck. Laura Bennett, RN, Cardiac Care Unit. She'd worked with Eric on dozens of cases. She knew him. She knew he was scheduled for surgery this morning. "Ma'am, step back. This doesn't concern you. That's one of our surgeons. He has surgery in an hour. What are you arresting him for?" "He's trespassing in the employee parking lot." Laura looked at Brian like he'd lost his mind. "He works here. He's been here for 6 years. He's Dr. Johnson, cardiothoracic surgery." Another voice joined in. A man in scrubs jogging across the parking lot from the direction of the emergency entrance. "Brian, what the hell are you doing? That's Dr. Johnson." This was Dr. Michael Turner, an emergency medicine physician who'd worked at Northside for 8 years. He'd collaborated with Eric on dozens of trauma cases, heart attacks, gunshot wounds to the chest, car accidents with cardiac injuries. They'd worked side by side in the operating room more times than either could count. Michael also knew Brian. They'd had coffee together in the hospital cafeteria multiple times over the past few months. Friendly conversations about work, about life. Michael thought Brian was a decent guy. This was shattering that assumption in real time. "Michael, this man claims to work here, but refused to show identification and became argumentative when I asked him to leave the premises." "Became argumentative?" "Brian, you called his doctor's badge a Halloween costume. You accused him of faking being a surgeon. Eric, tell him." Eric, still handcuffed against the patrol car, spoke carefully, every word measured. He knew this situation could escalate. He knew that black and brown men had been killed for less than talking back to police. "My hospital ID is right here on my chest. It's been visible this entire time. My medical license is in my wallet, in my back pocket. My car is parked in assigned spot 273. My name is Dr. Eric Johnson. I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon. I've worked here for 6 years, and I have a patient in pre-op waiting for a triple bypass that's scheduled for 8 a.m. Brian paused. He looked at Laura. He looked at Michael. He looked at the hospital building, where more staff were coming outside to see what was happening. A security guard, 2 more nurses, a guy in maintenance uniform. "You're a surgeon? I've been trying to tell you that." Michael stepped closer, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Brian, you've seen him in the cafeteria. You've probably seen him in the hallways a dozen times. He wears his surgical loops around his neck half the time. How do you not recognize him?" Brian looked at Eric more carefully now. The surgical loops, those magnifying glasses surgeons wear, were actually hanging from a chain inside his jacket collar, visible now that Brian was actually looking. The hospital badge hanging on his chest, the badge that had been there the whole time, with Eric's photo, his name, his department, cardiothoracic surgery, attending surgeon, the scrubs underneath the jacket, the backpack that probably contained medical equipment, not stolen property. The Honda parked in an assigned spot with a hospital parking permit visible on the dashboard. The 2 staff members vouching for him with absolute certainty. The pieces clicked together, slowly, too slowly. He'd handcuffed a surgeon in the hospital employee parking lot, a surgeon who'd been wearing a hospital badge the entire time. "I'm going to remove the handcuffs," Brian said slowly. "How generous," Eric replied, his voice tight with controlled fury. Brian uncuffed him. Eric rubbed his wrists where the metal had dug in. Red marks were already forming. They'd probably bruise. "I apologize for the confusion." "Confusion?" Eric turned to face him fully. "Officer Jensen, you saw a black man in the parking lot and assumed I was a criminal. You called my hospital badge a Halloween costume even though it was hanging right here on my chest the entire time. You could see my name. You could see my photo. You could see cardiothoracic surgery printed on it. You thought I was pretending to be a doctor. You didn't call hospital security to verify. You went straight to insults, threats, and handcuffs. That's not confusion. That's racial profiling." Laura was recording on her phone now. "Eric, do you want me to call administration?" "Yes, and call my attorney. This is not okay." Brian tried again. "Sir, we've had reports of car break-ins in this lot. I was investigating suspicious activity." "Suspicious activity? Walking to work in scrubs, with my hospital badge visible, having a phone in my hand, being black in a parking lot at dawn?" A small crowd had gathered now, nurses arriving for the morning shift, doctors, lab techs, maintenance staff. Several people were recording on their phones. The parking lot surveillance cameras had captured everything from multiple angles, though no one knew that yet. Michael pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Dr. Whitfield right now. Eric, do not let this go." Dr. Karen Whitfield was the chief of surgery. She was also known for not tolerating any kind of discrimination or bias in her department. This was going to be bad for Brian. Very bad. "Do you think the officer was racially profiling?" Type yes or no in the comments. Brian realized the situation was spiraling completely out of control. Multiple witnesses, multiple cameras, a surgeon with an impeccable reputation, hospital staff who knew Eric and were ready to vouch for him. All because Brian had seen a black man in a parking lot and assumed he was a criminal. "I was doing my job," Brian said weakly. "Your job is to protect people, not harass them," Eric replied. "My badge was in my pocket. You could have asked to see it. You could have called hospital security. You could have asked me literally any question to verify I work here. Instead, you went straight to ordering me around, threatening me and handcuffing me. Brian had no response. What could he say? He'd profiled someone based on appearance and assumptions. There was no defending that. He got back in his patrol car without another word and drove away. His hands were shaking on the steering wheel. He knew he'd made a catastrophic mistake. He just didn't realize yet exactly how catastrophic. Eric went inside 45 minutes late now. He went straight to the chief of surgery's office. Her door was open. She was at her desk, reviewing surgical schedules. She looked up when Eric appeared in her doorway. "Eric, good morning. You're cutting it close for the Patterson case. You okay?" "No, I need to tell you what just happened." He told her everything. Brian pulling up, the accusations, the handcuffs, Laura and Michael intervening, the whole absurd, humiliating encounter. Dr. Whitfield listened without interrupting. When Eric finished, she was silent for a moment. Then she picked up her phone. "I'm calling the hospital president. Then I'm calling our legal department. Then I'm calling the Atlanta Police Department's chief. This is unacceptable." By 8:15 a.m., everyone who needed to know about the incident knew about it. By 8 a.m., the hospital president was drafting a statement. Eric didn't perform the triple bypass that morning. He was too shaken, his hands still trembling slightly from the adrenaline. Another surgeon, Dr. Thomas Reed, took over the case. Eric spent the morning filing reports, giving statements, and trying to process what had happened. Richard Coleman's surgery went perfectly. Dr. Reed was excellent, one of the best. Richard was in recovery by noon, stable and doing well. But Eric felt guilty that he hadn't been there, hadn't been the one to keep his promise to Richard and his family. The hospital's response was immediate. The president released a statement by noon. "This morning, one of our most respected surgeons was racially profiled and handcuffed in our employee parking lot by a police officer who assumed he was a criminal. This is unacceptable. We are conducting a full investigation and will take all necessary action to ensure this never happens again." The video went viral by that afternoon. Laura's cell phone video showed everything. Brian approaching, Eric trying to explain, Brian ordering him to the car, the handcuffs, Laura and Michael running over. By evening, it had been viewed 5 million times. By the next morning, 20 million times. By the end of the week, 45 million times. The internal affairs investigation started immediately. The investigator was Lieutenant Denise Carter, a 15-year veteran who'd spent the last 5 years investigating officer misconduct. She pulled Brian's service record and found a pattern that should have been identified long ago. Over 6 years, Brian had stopped, questioned, or detained minorities at a rate 4 times higher than white individuals. His reports frequently used phrases like suspicious behavior or furtive movements to justify stops that had no legitimate basis. One incident from 3 years earlier involved a black teenager walking home from basketball practice. Brian's report said the teen matched the description of a robbery suspect. The body camera footage showed Brian couldn't articulate what description beyond black male, hoodie. The teen was detained for 30 minutes. No complaint was filed because the family didn't know they could. Another incident from 2 years ago involved a Hispanic woman pulled over for suspicious driving. Brian's report says she was driving slowly and looking at houses, consistent with casing for burglary. The body camera showed a woman using jeeps to find her sister's house. She was detained for 25 minutes. No complaint was filed. A third incident from 18 months ago involved a Middle Eastern man photographing buildings downtown. Brian's report said the man was photographing a government building and refused to explain why. The body camera showed a tourist taking photos of architecture. Brian detained him for 40 minutes and called the FBI's terrorism tip line. The FBI told Brian the man wasn't doing anything illegal. No complaint was filed because the man left the country the next day. Lieutenant Carter found 12 incidents over 6 years where Brian had stopped or detained minorities with no legitimate basis. None had resulted in arrests. All had been justified with vague language about suspicious behavior, and all 12 incidents involved minorities. Brian's stop rate for white individuals was 70% lower than the department average. His stop rate for minorities was 200% higher. Lieutenant Carter's report was 78 pages long. Her conclusion, Officer Brian Collins demonstrates a clear pattern of racial profiling, pretextual stops, and bias-based policing. His detention of Dr. Johnson represents the predictable result of years of unchecked discrimination. Her recommendation, immediate termination and referral to the Department of Justice for civil rights violations. Brian was fired within 72 hours. The Atlanta Police Department held a press conference. The chief said, Officer Jensen's actions were indefensible. He racially profiled one of Atlanta's most respected surgeons. This is exactly the kind of behavior that destroys community trust. He no longer represents this department. Eric filed a federal civil rights lawsuit. Like Judge Gloria Harper in Phoenix, he didn't need the money. He made $400,000 a year as a surgeon, but he wanted accountability. The lawsuit alleged false arrest, unlawful detention, racial discrimination, violation of constitutional rights, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. It named Brian Collins personally and the city of Atlanta. The city's attorneys reviewed the evidence: body camera footage, parking lot surveillance from 3 angles, cell phone videos from multiple witnesses, a victim who was a prominent surgeon with unimpeachable credibility, an officer with a documented pattern of racial profiling. They settled in 5 weeks, $570,000, plus reforms that went beyond anything Atlanta had implemented before. The reforms included mandatory implicit bias training for all officers, with annual recertification, quarterly analysis of all stops by race with public reporting, automatic review by Internal Affairs for any officer whose stop rates show racial disparities, creation of a civilian review board with subpoena power, and requirement that all stops be documented with specific articulable facts. The settlement also required Atlanta to hire an independent auditor to review 5 years of stop data and identify officers with patterns of discriminatory policing. The audit would be made public. Officers identified with patterns would be subject to mandatory retraining or termination. And like Phoenix, the settlement required 10 years of oversight, 10 years of monitoring, 10 years of accountability. If you think these reforms are necessary, type reform in the comments. The settlement press conference was covered nationally. Eric stood at the podium in his white doctor's coat, his hospital ID clipped to his pocket. I'm a surgeon. I save lives. I've performed over 800 cardiac procedures. And I was handcuffed in my workplace parking lot because an officer looked at my face and decided I was a criminal. He called my hospital badge a Halloween costume. He couldn't imagine that someone who looks like me could actually be a doctor. He paused, looking at the cameras. I'm fortunate. I have resources. I have colleagues who stood up for me. I have cameras that recorded everything. But how many people experience this without those advantages? How many people has Officer Jensen stopped who didn't have the ability to fight back? That's why this matters. The video went viral again. Eric's statement was viewed 30 million times in the first week. The comment sections filled with stories from Black Americans sharing experiences of being profiled, questioned, assumed to be criminals in their own workplaces. The hashtag #DrWhileBlack trended for 4 days. Black American physicians across the country shared their stories, being mistaken for janitors or orderlies, being asked by patients if a real doctor was coming, being questioned about whether they were really doctors or just medical students. The pattern was undeniable. Medical organizations responded. The American Medical Association released a statement condemning racial profiling of healthcare workers. The American College of Surgeons released data showing that Black American surgeons reported being profiled at rates 3 times higher than white surgeons. Civil rights organizations used Eric's case to push for police reform. The ACLU created a database for reporting racial profiling. Within months, they had documented over 12,000 incidents. Brian's criminal case went differently than Matthew Harlan's in Phoenix. The district attorney declined to prosecute, saying there was insufficient evidence of criminal intent. Brian had released Eric without arrest. No physical harm had occurred beyond red marks on his wrists. The decision sparked outrage. Thousands protested outside the DA's office. The DA eventually agreed to have the case reviewed by the Georgia Attorney General's office. The Attorney General also declined prosecution but issued a scathing report about Brian's pattern of conduct. Brian tried to find work in law enforcement. He applied to 23 police departments in Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee. All rejected him. His name was too well known. The video was too viral. He applied to private security companies. They all rejected him too. Even security companies didn't want someone known for racial profiling. He eventually found work as a night manager at a storage facility, making $19 an hour. His law enforcement career was over. His marriage fell apart. His friends distanced themselves. The viral video had destroyed his life. Eric still works at Northside Hospital. He's still performing surgeries. He's still saving lives. But something changed after that morning. He's more aware now of how others see him, more cautious, more vigilant. He speaks at medical conferences now about implicit bias in healthcare and law enforcement. He's become an advocate for reform. He never wanted to be a spokesperson, but the incident gave him a platform. The independent audit of Atlanta Police Department stop data was released 18 months after the settlement. The results were shocking but not surprising. The audit found that over a 5-year period, black drivers were stopped at rates 3.7 times higher than white drivers. When controlled for the reason for the stop, the disparities were even worse. For equipment violations, black drivers were stopped at rates 7 times higher. The audit identified 38 officers with stop patterns that showed clear racial bias. These officers accounted for 51% of all stops involving minorities, despite representing only 12% of the force. Brian was the 5th worst offender on the list. His stop rate for minorities was 4.2 times higher than for white individuals. His rate of finding contraband during those stops was 70% lower than the department average. He was stopping people based on race, not on actual suspicious behavior. All 38 officers identified in the audit were placed under review. 8 were terminated, 12 were suspended and required to complete extensive retraining. 18 were moved to administrative positions pending further investigation. The audit became a model for other cities. Denver conducted a similar audit, Chicago, Los Angeles, Seattle. The pattern was consistent. Officers with clear racial bias in their stop patterns had been operating unchecked for years because no one was analyzing the data. Eric's case became a teaching example in medical schools and police academies. The video is shown in implicit bias training across the country. It's used as the definitive example of how assumptions based on race can lead to injustice even when the target is a highly credentialed professional. Northside Hospital implemented new policies. All employees now receive prominent ID badges that are visible even in street clothes. Hospital security conducts regular training with local police to ensure officers know what hospital staff look like. The hospital president meets quarterly with police leadership to address concerns. The employee parking lot now has signs every 20 feet, hospital staff parking. If you see someone you don't recognize, call hospital security, not police. A small change, but one that acknowledges the reality of what happened. Eric still parks in spot 273. He still arrives an hour early for surgeries, but now he clips his badge to his jacket before he gets out of his car. A small accommodation to a reality he wishes didn't exist. One Tuesday morning, 14 minutes. A police officer who saw a black American surgeon and decided he was a criminal. And a doctor who refused to accept that discrimination was just part of the job. If this story opened your eyes to racial profiling in everyday situations, share it. Subscribe for more stories about accountability and justice. And comment below, have you ever been profiled based on your appearance? Tell your story. See you next time.